Hello everybody, my name is Kyle Daniels, i.e. the Pixel Prince, and welcome to my first impression review of the game Final Fantasy Dissidia Duellum. Listen, I understand I'm a little bit late, probably about like 2, possibly 3 by the time this video releases because I'm recording it now about almost 2 weeks out from the initial closed beta test. And more than anything, I know that it's been over, I don't know, close to 9 years since I last posted a video on this channel specifically. And it was like a really crappy like pixel art time lapse. Well, crappy by my standards of today, because obviously I like to think I'm a much better artist than I was back then. But hey, you know what? I like to live by the rules of it's better late than never, and more importantly, no time like the present. If you'd like to skip straight into the meat and potatoes of the review, I'll go ahead and leave like a little timestamp here and maybe a little link down below so it'll be easier for you to access that, because I do want to talk about a few things before we jump into the review, just mainly my personal biases and things that I think are relevant to the review. But if you don't care about any of that and you want to just go straight for it, yeah, go ahead and skip ahead. Otherwise, I'll try to make this as brief as possible. All right, so the first thing I want to note is that this game was obviously a closed beta, but it is still a beta, meaning that there are things within the game that most likely could, well, I don't want to say they will change because I don't want to tell anybody that, but everything in this game is technically subject to change in one way or another. I unfortunately don't feel like the things that I had the biggest problems and issues with in this game are going to change though. So for what it's worth, you know, I'm not as hopeful for those changes to be made, but hey, you know what? Square has surprised me in the past, so who knows? Anything can happen. Second thing I should obviously mention is that this was a limited time closed beta test. It was only ran for I think a week span from like one Friday to the next. I'll have to actually get the exact dates and I'll put them on the screen here. But yeah, it was a very limited time, and more than that, there was actually a designated time each day that you could play. I guess I was unaware of what that time was, or I was incorrect in thinking that, because when the first day dropped, it was at 10 p.m. and it went from I believe 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning. And then I guess every other day past that, it was 7 p.m. to 1, or maybe they changed it from Monday through Friday. But I'm like, why does this game have office hours? But for some reason in my mind, I thought every single day it was 10. And unfortunately, I have a job that makes me wake up at 4:30 in the morning, so I'm sleeping during the hours of operation of this game. However, I did have like 3 days off. I was able to kind of get in some gameplay time, and funny enough, I think I got more gameplay time in on the days that I didn't work, because I just have insomnia and a hard time sleeping. So I did get about 4 to 5 matches in on this game. I explored some of the UI and some of the different mechanics throughout, mainly the gacha elements that I'm going to talk about in a second. But yeah, those were primary things that were there, and I honestly think I got the full picture of what this game is about. So yeah, for what it's worth, I didn't play a whole lot, but I think what I did play was enough to kind of get a gist of what this game is going to be about. Now, as far as my biases go, there's 2 that I think are worth mentioning specifically for this review. The first one being for Final Fantasy, which, if you couldn't tell from my my Square Enix mural back here, I'm a bit obsessed with. I'll be plain and just state it. Final Fantasy is one of my favorite series. In fact, actually, you know what? Screw that. I'd actually go out of my way to say it is my favorite series. It may not take up my #1 spot, but I have such a fondness and love for this game series. I've been a fan for a little over 10 years. I own most of the English titles that have released here in America, you know, and various other collectors editions and memorabilia, as well as merch, and I've been a pretty big supporter of them, even when they don't make a mainline game, and other Square Enix titles like Dragon Quest, Star Ocean, Valkyrie Profile, and even some of the older games like Parasite Eve and even Vagrant Story. I've been a huge Square Enix and Squaresoft fan for a while now, so I think it's hard to come to terms with some of the stuff that I'm going to say within this review, but it is the truth, and I have to be like as unbiased as possible when it comes to it. So despite it being Final Fantasy, the second thing that I think obviously holds the biggest hold on me as far as my distaste in this game is that it is in fact a mobile game. And I know what most people are going to say when it comes to Dissidia. Dissidia has always been a mobile game. It's originally released on the PSP, and then with Opera Omnia, it was released on the you know, cell phones as well, iOS, Android, and so is this game. So it's always been a portable game. However, mainly just the things that surround portable games. First thing being that none of these games are permanent. They all have a lifeline, and Square knows this. In fact, they don't really care that many of these games aren't permanent. The biggest thing I hate is that most of these are really tied to online engines, so there's no way to just kind of play them offline without that support. And I think that's very important when it comes to these games and game preservation in general, because when these games are gone, these games are gone. They don't exist anymore, and it really sucks. Unfortunately, Square has had a pretty bad track record with this, because their previous released mobile games all have that same fate. Games like Mobius, or I think it's more, I don't want to say Morbius Final Fantasy, because it is not Morbin time here, but Mobius Final Fantasy, crap, what was the other one? Final Fantasy Record Keeper's no longer up. Kingdom Hearts Unchained is another one that was up for a while and they closed it down. And even the most recently released Dissidia game, Opera Omnia, was up for a couple years, and I think in 2024 they finally shut and canned the servers, which upset quite a few people. I scrolled through YouTube seeing like so many people putting like a gravestone like rest in peace, man, rest in peace, and I'm just like, that's pretty much what you're setting yourself up for when it comes to mobile games, and maybe not necessarily from other companies, but definitely at least from Square Enix. And that does not bode well for the game that we're going to be talking about today. But once again, it's still in beta, so hey, you know, even if you didn't, there's still a couple years that you might get out of it before it would ever close down. My other thing that I really don't care for when it comes to these games, aside from the fact that they generally don't end until they end, is more of the fact of how these are really just kind of glorified gambling apps. Like, that's really all they are when it comes down to it. You're essentially you're not even buying these games, you're getting these games for free, which is great. That's kind of like the incentive to bring you in, get you addicted to the gameplay loop, and then be like, okay, you know you want this, because if you get this, that could help you play this game and you know, do more and stuff like that. In most games, I can be pretty harmless, but I've known people in my life who've spent well over $4,000 on gacha games, and it can be an addiction. And I think the worst thing about this game specifically is how it has PvPvE. So you do fight other players, meaning that you can utilize some of those gacha elements to technically give yourself an advantage. And I don't like that. That turns the game from just free to play competitive to free to play, but with pay to win elements. It'd be different if it was just like costumes, outfits, you know, crap like that. But unfortunately, it does involve attacks, and I will talk a little bit about that once we actually hit the review. The only other thing that I have to say outside of all of my biases is that everything that I'm going to say in this video is my own opinion. I have a lot of experience. I've played a lot of games. I've done reviews in the past, and I'm trying to kind of move more into a market where I'm actually working on doing reviews for newer games so I can actually talk about these, because I generally have my opinions, but you know, I never actually share them with the internet. And I think it would be really cool if I could start getting early access to these games to kind of let people know what I think about them. My biggest thing, and this is probably just the moral of the story here, is just form your own opinion, right? Like, hear me out, but if you have the opportunity to, definitely just try to form your own opinion. And this game is going to be a great example of you being able to do that, because this game is going to be free to play. So even outside of the sake of me reviewing an $80 game, this one's going to be free. So you'll have an opportunity to play it when it first releases. If you have any kind of remote interest in it, I'd definitely say give it a try. And you know, see what you think. You might not always feel the same way that I feel. And once again, I didn't really like deep dive into this game, because once again, it was a limited time. So I will try to come back with a full review of the game whenever it fully releases, because I will give it another shot. But I will tell you all my thoughts right now. So let's just go ahead and dive right into the review. Final Fantasy Dissidia Duellum is the newest entry in the Dissidia series. And although it kind of follows the formula of some of the Dissidia games, including like having all the Final Fantasy characters together and sort of that mishmash of worlds and interactions, fortunately its gameplay is kind of where the stark contrast begins to set it apart from the others, and unfortunately not in the best light. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself, so let's just start from the beginning. Let's talk about the story. Dissidia has never really been known for its story, I think, and it's always been, in my mind, just a fan service game. I've never really thought of it as like any kind of canon event. In my opinion, it was just a way for fans to be like, I wonder what happens if Cloud could talk to Lightning. That would be really cool. And that's essentially what this is, which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So yeah, when I talk about the story, it's not really meant to be like super serious, and as far as I can tell, there isn't really a whole lot of story to tell here anyway, but here's the general gist of it. The story starts with Cloud, who is in this weird red void. All of a sudden, Sephiroth appears. Cloud attempts to, you know, approach him. He gets blocked by an invisible wall. Sephiroth opens a portal, and Cloud finds himself in the middle of Japan. I believe the street is Shibuya. If I'm not mistaken, that could be it. This story does take place in the real world, so it's not something that's uncommon to happen. I mean, it's already happened in Kingdom Hearts 4. Yeah, we got Sora with normal size feet and those big shoes. I'm like, yeah, so you're just lying to everybody, dude. And then of course you have Neo, The World Ends With You, and it's nothing that's super surprising, but if anything, I gotta say it's a little more disappointing, and I'll get more into that in a second. But yeah, Cloud finds himself in the middle of the street. Iron Giant appears, attacks people, and absorbs their essence. Cloud jumps into action to save them, kills the essence. Sephiroth grabs the crystal that's left over, and then proceeds to literally spawn in a red version of Cloud. When another party appears, another boss appears, and Warrior of Light, Lightning, and Terra come up behind you to support you after you save this child. I can't remember what their name is, but I'll list it on the screen here. You kind of go through the tutorial. Everything past that point is all online play, and right after you finish that tutorial mission, it says Cloud's story is done for now, but your story has just begun. So it just gives you a character point, allows you to choose what character you want, and you choose. Now, obviously, I chose Cloud. I'm a big Final Fantasy VII fan, and honestly, it doesn't really matter what character you choose. I know each one kind of has a different play style, and they all have different roles, so Cloud's more of like a charging ahead. I didn't really get a chance to try out the other characters. Like I said, in my beginning anything. I briefly played this game. I played it on a time schedule, so you can't really play through the entire day or whenever you have a free moment. It was exclusively from like, I believe 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. and I was only aware of I thought it was always 10 p.m. to 1. So I had very, very little time to actually give more characters a shot. However, I did unlock other characters. I just didn't get a chance to play them. So that's pretty much where I'm at right now. But from my cloud gameplay, I tried looking into the story because, you know, the original games had story. Even NT has a story to an extent. And unfortunately, I just didn't get really a whole lot. So I don't know if there is any continuation of these stories or even what the stories of the other ones are, because I've technically never beaten any of those story modes for any of those games. So I can't really speak on it, and I haven't played Opera Omnia because that game is no longer up, as I've stated before. So to me, the story is just there. And even when I did unlock a story element through a challenge, I believe, it was a wall of text, literally them texting on the cell phone and talking about how they're acclimating to life in the real world. That's it. So yeah, I don't know, man. To me, it's just like, it's a throwaway thing. You don't really, you take it or leave it at this point. I don't know if the like end of seasons will give you another story element or a cutscene or, you know, how the story is really going to work. But once again, it was only out for a week. So we can't, I don't know if anybody knows, but there's really no way of telling right now exclusively how the story is going to play out. Or if there's even a definitive end right now from what the beta gave us. So once again, I'll try to return to the game whenever it's fully out and maybe give it a little bit more time and see if I can. But as for right now, the story is almost like non-existent and it's just kind of there as like padding for those fan servicey moments. Next, I think we should talk about the gameplay because I think that's the thing I have the most amount of gripes with currently, especially if you're coming from a game like either the original Final Fantasy Dissidias for PSP, which includes Dissidia Duodecimo 12, or Final Fantasy NT, the arcade port to PS4, which I've actually been playing recently and even joined a Reddit group to see if maybe we could get more matches online because the servers are essentially dead, which really fucking sucks. However, what I will say about this game is that it does change the formula, and I know that every game has kind of done it differently. This game is a 3v3 PvPvE arena fighter, and the whole purpose of this game is to kill the boss, from what I've seen. I don't know if there are other game modes like the last game had with the crystal mode or whatever, but this game, from what I've seen, just has be the first team to defeat the boss. You both are competing on opposite sides of this sort of like L-shaped arena. You start on one side, the other team starts on the other, and as far as I can tell, as the player, the other team is technically like the mannequins, and to them, you are the mannequins. It's a very weird thing, and I don't really know how that plays in the story because that just means the good guys always win. I'd also like to add that there are technically no villains as of yet in this game, so like it's all exclusively just heroes fighting against each other, but maybe that ties into the story. I don't really know, but definitely doesn't really feel as Dissidia as it should. Ultimately, the gameplay is a far departure, okay? There's no dodging, there's no blocking, there's no dashing, there's no canceling. There's literally nothing in this game aside from maybe some of the movement that even remotely feels Dissidia, and I think that's kind of my biggest issue with the game. Here's how its standard match would play out. You can use this little touchpad at the very bottom, and you can actually kind of change the location and how you actually activate the camera. You can either use your other hand to turn the camera, or you can just have it fixed, similar to like how Kingdom Hearts and older action games had, where the camera just kind of like follows you when you're with your movement and tries to align. And that's honestly the style I chose, just because I didn't feel like having two fingers, especially if I wanted to try to use an attack. It just, then I'm having like 3 to 4 fingers on the screen at a time, and it gets really freaking messy when you try to do that. The boss doesn't spawn in immediately. Both teams start and you kind of move forward. You'll notice that there are these enemies that surround a crystal, and you just walk up to the enemy and you just start attacking. You don't have to press any specific button. It just automatically starts attacking. They do give you an ability to like tap the screen to be able to do more damage to these enemies, which I think is kind of cool, but I don't know, it seems like pointless at that point. Once you defeat all the enemies, your character will automatically start cleansing the crystal, and then you will get these burst points or bravery points, I think they're called. And the boss generally shows up by the time you've gotten through at least 1 or 2 of these, and you're supposed to beeline it for him. Now, you can't do standard damage to the boss normally. You actually have to use bravery attacks. However, bravery attacks won't do damage like they did in past games unless you activate burst mode, specifically for the boss, because other enemies on the other team can take damage from standard and the bravery attack. So essentially it becomes a race for whoever to get as much bravery burst as possible. So you're either cleansing crystals, or you can try to beeline it and just start trying to attack the opposite team to try and get their bravery from them and hopefully stifle them a little bit so you can actually get more damage off on the boss. It became a pretty weird kind of back and forth mix, and I did lose a few rounds, but I think I won a majority of the rounds that I participated in, and it wasn't really a bad time at all. It's just like, it gets boring. Like, I can't see myself sitting here and playing this game for hours, and I don't think it was ever intended to be made for that, but yeah, I don't know. I don't see myself spending a whole lot of time, I guess, in this game and doing that kind of thing. But once again, different strokes for different folks. All I can say here is that it sucks to have a lot of the crate elements that kind of made this series popular, like being able to dash, the indestructible environments. And one thing that I'm going to mention specifically for the graphics section is like the actual Final Fantasy worlds. Now that they've taken that out of the mix, we're just in the real world, and that kind of makes it a little boring. That was part of the thing I liked, where it was like you're crossing over in a different world, seeing Cloud fight Ramza in Cornelia Fields, or going to Balam Garden, having Onion Knight fighting Vaughn from Final Fantasy 12. I don't know, there was always like some sort of cool thing about the mixture of all of these games, and kind of fully selling me on the fact that they are like, you know, integrating into each other's worlds, and then this just kind of takes it out and just puts it there. What could make this more interesting is make the maps have shifting thing to change gameplay up a little bit, and maybe start merging with the other world and stuff like that. Anything to kind of create a little bit more tension on the map, to make it a little bit less just, hey, standard practice, go forward, defeat these guys, and then defeat the boss and hope that you don't get killed by the other team. Once again, early access. I don't even know if there was another map or anything else. I only got the Japanese map, so I have no idea if there's anything else, but yeah, this is pretty much how I felt about it. Now, outside of the gameplay, because there really isn't much outside of that, I did do a couple challenges, like I said, that just kind of unlocks story, but I think my second biggest gripe is definitely going to be with the gacha elements of this game. This game has gacha elements, obviously. It's a free-to-play game, and unfortunately I was hoping that maybe they wouldn't be the way they are, but unfortunately they are. So they mix in characters and costumes for one gacha element, and then the other gacha element is for your attacks. Now, my gripe with the costume and characters is that it just annoys the hell out of me. I'm like, these two things should have been separate if you wanted to do it, because I have two Clouds, but they're both wearing the same outfit. If it was like for an outfit, that would be kind of cool. Like, get me outfits for characters that I don't have yet, so when I do unlock them, at least I'll have more incentive to try to get that character. But not separating them makes it more frustrating, because character Cloud with normal costume and character Cloud with his hoodie on technically are the same exact character. There's really no difference. They don't get any different attacks, as far as I can tell anyway, and it seems pointless to me. And I get most gacha games do this, where you're going to get duplicates, and I don't know if there was a trade-in system for this game, so I can't really complain about that. But from what I saw, I didn't see anything, and yeah, having two Clouds is annoying. I was able to get Zidane as a character, and I believe Promptu. I unlocked Renoa, but I went for a reroll because I didn't want Renoa. I wanted somebody else, and I got Zidane, so I was like, yeah, I'll stick with Zidane. But that, to me, these two things should have been separate, so you could have actually collected costumes. I wouldn't mind getting duplicate costumes for a character, so that maybe I could put 2 or 3 more together to get another reroll for a potential at getting another costume or something. I would say get rid of the character rolls. Like, have a character roll for a thing, like if you want a random character, but maybe give a secondary currency to be able to buy characters, similar to like games like Fortnite, so it's not a random thing, and just keep the costumes exclusive, because you don't need 2 Clouds, but you could get as many costumes as you want. And I think that's cool, because the series is full of them. Like, they only have to pull from another game. Like, that's really all they got to do. The second gacha element is for special attacks and magics, and honestly, this one isn't as bad, but it can be, and here's why I say that. Getting your standard run-of-the-mill magics can be equipped to just about anybody, and you can activate them at any point in time when they fill. They all have like this recharge rate, and it's pretty easy and standard for you to get through these and stuff like that. But my biggest issue with this is that they can be upgraded, and you use these things called growth eggs to upgrade them, which is fine. Growth eggs are whatever, but you can purchase more. Beyond any of that, you can actually push a lot of these past that point. Now, normally that wouldn't be bad because these are attacks, but these attacks and their levels and their stats upgrade your stats. So if somebody just, I don't know, spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars buying growth eggs and getting their special attacks that they want, then they can pretty much like max out their stats and just roll into a ranked match at a much lower rank and just decimate everybody with a few attacks. Now, whether or not that can actually happen, I don't know. This is just like me kind of guesstimating, like, okay, I can see this happening. I haven't seen it happen. Once again, the game is only out for a week. But as far as like everything else goes, I have no idea how this can play out. But right now, I don't see it being good, because it just gives off like that vibe where it's like, hey, I spent like thousands of dollars and now I'm like the best player. So it's like, yeah, you're incentivizing pay to win and, you know, pumping money into a game, a competitive game at that. And I always hate that. Like, if you want to use it for vanity stuff, use it for vanity, but not for attacks. Worst part is like you get so many random attacks, and right now the roster is pretty limited. I think I kind of mentioned that there's only heroes in this game, so there's no villains. It's only like maybe like 10 characters max, at least once again for the beta. But I can see once they start adding more to the roster, you get like 50, 60 characters in this game. Every pull is gonna suck. Unless they give you more pulls for different attacks, this is just gonna be a slog to try to get through, because something tells me they're not gonna try to prioritize, hey, you're gonna get guaranteed attacks for the character that you actually use. If that was the case, they should make that a thing. Like, hey, here's this type of chest. Your primary character that you have the most playtime on on, or one that you set as a primary character will be guaranteed to get at least this rank or higher skill. You know what I mean? Like at that point, I think that would be beneficial. Now, of course, people would easily cheap that out. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that I think could be fixed for this. Outside of that, I didn't really notice anything else. I didn't play any casuals. I only did the challenges. And as far as I could tell, that was also online. There's also no communication with your teammates unless you want to text, and who's going to really do that in the middle of a match? Plus, this was like standard. It was like all over the world. So, hey, even if they understand English, there was no guarantee that I was going to understand whatever they might have been putting in there. So at the end of the day, like we all did our own thing and we didn't really work together, but I can sell like if you're going to have a rank system and it's going to be like 3v3 with actual other teammates that you kind of have to rely on to some extent, just like when I was playing NT, communication is key on a lot of that, and it's definitely going to benefit people if there's an easier way to talk to other players as well. The cool thing is though, you can actually like kind of follow them, and if you enjoyed playing with them or think that they play very well, you can actually like send them a friend request like after the match. You give everybody a thumbs up and you can actually like roll with them if you want to, you know, play other matches together. So I really think that's kind of cool. There's also links in your actual profile, which I think is the first time I think I've ever seen that in a mobile game. So like you can link your Facebook and you can link your Discord, or I think it was Discord. I don't know. You can link your Twitter, you can link, you know, other websites and stuff like that. And I think that's really kind of cool. It's a little bit more of a connecting factor between, you know, the community and the game. And I don't know, that's different. It's different. I don't think I've ever really seen that. But hey, you know, once again, I don't play a whole lot of mobile games, so maybe that's a common thing and it's just, you know, a standard thing at this point. But I digress. Although I mainly had a lot of complaints about the gameplay, one thing I will say about this game is its graphics are gorgeous. This game looks great. I love the style that they went, even if it's not a traditional Final Fantasy style that I'm used to seeing. It looks really, really good. I also really like the designs of everybody. Yeah, they have their standard costumes, but they're, you know, their redesigns, their modern day wear looks freaking great. I gotta give them props where props are due. Not only that, but the environments look okay. Once again, I wish there was more destructive, you know, things, and maybe there are, and I just might not have noticed them because they're not as like grand scale as like getting Cloud ran into a freaking pillar or a tree or whatever. But yeah, at the end of the day, I do think that the environments are a little boring, at least the environment that I have seen, which was just the Tokyo street. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's a bland map, and I'm used to seeing like something that's recognizable from another Final Fantasy game. So for me, it's like, you know, I'm really hoping that maybe they get to a point where they can do sort of like a crossover thing where the real world starts fading into Final Fantasy worlds and creates like hazards and other things like that that can make the match a little more interesting to play. As far as the animations, they're great. Effects are great. The UI is a little crazy and hectic. I mean, that's most mobile games nowadays anyway. It's just like filled with a bunch of notifications and red bubbles to tell you, hey, go here and collect this and do all this, and here's another menu to do this and stuff like that. The only thing I had an issue with was the UI on the main screen, which was mostly a gameplay issue, but like, yeah, like I said, I accidentally used a couple attacks once upon a time, and it frustrated me because I'm like, those were the attacks I was going to use on the boss, and I accidentally used them because my finger was just fat and like, I just couldn't help that. So another thing too is the music. The music's great. I love the remixes. I always love the remixes whenever they do them. It's standard songs that you've come to know and love, so it's nothing too out of question. I don't think I've heard a bad remix in this game so far. But yeah, the voice acting is pretty good. They all speak Japanese for right now. I don't know if they're going to change that in a future release, but I mean, it seems pretty normal. I mean, hell, they are in Japan, so I mean, shit, if any language they should speak, it should be Japanese. So at the end of the day, long story short, I just gotta say, I don't really care for the game. I don't think I'll be extremely excited or like waiting with bated breath when the actual game finally drops. I will download it. I will play it. I will give it a fair shot, just like I gave the closed beta a fair shot, and hopefully be as unbiased as possible. But right now, I'm not holding out hope. I'm not holding any kind of high hopes for this game whatsoever. To me, it'll probably just be dead within another couple years, and any kind of money or effort or time that you put into it, it's just going to be wasted. But Square's going to keep doing what Square does, so I'll play it. Like I said, I'll give it a shot. I'll see how it plays. I'll see if they improve any of the things that I said. I doubt they will, because most of those are just the major gameplay elements that have probably been in production for years now, but it is what it is. Last thing I'd have to say is that it would be nice to have maybe like a controller support for this game, or even the option to kind of turn it sideways instead of having it in portrait mode. Once again, it's a freaking crime, man. It's a freaking crime to have games in portrait mode. Square has an amazing app library, and unfortunately so many of their games are either like super rare, like Dragon Quest V is super rare on the DS, but it's available on the App Store, but it's stuck in portrait mode with no controller support, and it's just like, what the hell are we doing? Worse yet, Dragon Quest VIII in portrait, like, you can't have this beautiful freaking game and then like squish it, bro. What the hell is that? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but a lot of the stuff Square does sometimes doesn't make a lot of sense to me, so I guess I can't be too surprised. Outside of that though, I did want to say this. I do intend to keep doing these reviews for this channel, and I will see you all in the next review.